everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. I am so elated to be here today on this panel. By way of introduction, my name is Diana Angelini. I'm a technology strategist at a company called BlackRock, which, if you haven't heard of it, is actually one of the largest financial institutions in the world. We actually manage over $7 trillion of the world's money. But aside from that, what a lot of people don't know is that BlackRock is actually one of the largest enterprise technology companies within financial services. And we have a product called Aladdin, which I work on in my day-to-day. But aside from my day-to-day job, one of my equal, if not even greater passions is women's empowerment. And I'm really active in the BlackRock Women's Network. And specifically, I do what's called external partnerships, which is taking all that we've learned from BlackRock's over 1,000 member women's organization and bring that externally into the community. I was in San Francisco for 3 years, so I did events with other tech companies, startups, and all we did was share best practices with what Facebook's doing, what Google's doing, and what BlackRock's doing. And we attended different women's conferences as well. So that's how I found out about LookUp, which was last fall, when I hosted an event with over 12 different tech companies: Google, Snapchat, Salesforce, venture capitalists, healthcare startups. And Susan and I did a fireside chat, and I thought this topic was just so incredibly relevant, not only to women, but especially personally to me. Candidly, I struggle with tech life balance and how much time I spend on my screen and how social media impacts my own mental health. And I am so excited today to be joined by the next generation of women leaders on this panel who are across different ages and backgrounds, who are going to share with us not only what's going on today in society and with women, but give us actionable takeaways that we can implement in our day-to-day lives that they actually are taking in their day-to-day lives, so that we can start working for a better tech life balance and have tech for good, especially with women today. So before I introduce our panelists, I've got two really quick housekeeping agenda items. The first is question and answer. We definitely want to hear from you. The last 10 minutes are dedicated only to Q&A. So like literally right beneath my face, there's a little Q&A question. Send me a question directly. It can be for the group. You can ask it to a specific panelist, but just chat me the Q&A within the little Zoom window. And the second housekeeping item is Q&A. Consider it like a group chat with your best friends. Like, let's hype each other up. Let's type like, yes, like when you hear something you like, text us something fun, and honestly, just chat what you're really interested in hearing about today, because that's going to keep the conversation relevant. And that's on the right-hand side of the Whova screen. So let's get it started. Like, let's have the chat pop up. Text us what you want to hear about today, and maybe like something fun about like one of your passion projects as well. So I'll stop talking now, and without further ado, let's introduce the panelists. Let's start with Lena. Lena, you've got the floor.
Hi guys, my name is Lena Grunhofer. I'm currently located in New York City. I'm originally from the city of Chicago, and today I'm a social media strategist and digital marketing manager for Pride Global, which is a global staffing agency. And on the side, I have just registered for an LLC and manage a bunch of different global clients, which include fashion, staffing, and other areas within the industry. And as my passion project includes my sock company, which is called Mitch Bogan Collection. And what led me here today is my diverse background working for some of the world's biggest agencies, which include Facebook, Louis Vuitton, and Christian Louboutin. And I'm really grateful to be here because I'm a huge feminist. I come from a very woman-based background with my family being all women, and I'm just happy to share my thoughts and ideas on beauty, fashion, and more today.
Thanks, Lena. Let's next hear from Samia.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Samia. I'm a senior in high school based in Ottawa. And so I've always been really interested in like STEM. And so a lot of my work lies in like neuroscience, mental health, and like BCI development. And then one thing I continue to notice like throughout my exploration was that a lot of problems like differently and disproportionately affect women. And so two, I guess, areas that I wanted to explore was A, like representation in STEM, and B was just like how we can optimize for women, whether that be women's health or just women's mental health, that kind of thing. And so I did a lot of exploration in like how data manifests, like the data we use to train algorithms manifests itself as like gender disparity. And so I think like that's something worth looking into. And if we don't identify the problem and kind of hit the root causes, then we won't be able to dissolve the problem as a whole. So I'm really excited to share my perspective and get all of yours.
Yeah, we're excited to hear from you too. Let's next hear from Olivia.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Schultz and I'm originally from Minnesota, but I'm currently a senior at Colorado College and studying psychology. Over the summer, I was working for a new nonprofit called Live More, Screen Less, doing research for them on how social media and digital devices are affecting our well-being. I'm also doing research currently on Zoom and learning and seeing how that affects girls and their cognitive capacities.
Amazing. I know. I'm so excited to get into that discussion today on the Zoom screen time and even like our own cognitive behaviors. So super looking forward to that. And last but not least, Haley.
Hi everyone, I'm Haley. I'm 17, also a senior in high school, and I'm based in Toronto. A little bit about me, I'm also in the STEM area. I love biologies and recently have been looking into brain-computer interfaces, similar to Samia. I actually found out about LookUp and this summit because I started my first not-for-profit chapter of the United Nations Foundation Girl Up in my local community. And so that's basically what I've been up to right now. So far we're recruiting, and I've noticed a lot of I've had firsthand experience actually with a lot of different issues when it comes to women's mental health, physical health, and just like gender disparity and bias-based issues. And I'm super excited to be here and talk a little bit more about that.
Amazing. Yeah, we will definitely get to all of this today. So the first topic that we wanted to cover that we heard from a lot of women about was beauty standards. So Lena, you've worked in fashion. Olivia, you do work with, cognitive behavior, and same with Haley. And I know we had a great discussion about, how the plastic surgery rates are rising because people want to look like their Snapchat filters, which is insane to me. I would love to hear from your perspective, how these beautification standards are impacting women and their mental health. So maybe if we could just, hear from the three of you in that order. Your perspectives on like the research you've done and how we can help like combat this and what a problem it is.
Yeah, for sure. I can go ahead first. I actually did some research on how Zoom actually beautifies you. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that when you join a Zoom call, you can select like a beautification filter, and it almost like smooths out your skin. It looks like it smooths out your skin.
So I'm on it now. Yeah, we've got it now. This is my beautification.
Photoshops you. Basically photoshops you. Yeah. So I found out that plastic surgery rates have actually been rising because of this. People want to look like how they look in a Zoom conference. They want to have that same standard because sometimes it makes your nose a little smaller. Same thing with Snapchat filters. People want to look like they look in filters. So I've actually done some research and found out that because plastic surgeries have been rising, not only have people been wanting to look how they look online, but because we're in such a virtual world now due to COVID-19, it's just you see yourself so much more often than you normally do.
Yeah, I think that's a great transition to the work, Olivia, that you're doing on looking at yourself and how that impacts how you learn. So can you share about that?
Yeah, so one of the current research projects that I'm working on is is about self-objectification in young girls over Zoom. So as you have all probably used Zoom, if you haven't, you can see yourself all the time, but there's actually a button that you can hide your self view. But people don't really know about that because we have become so engrossed in our own images over Zoom right now that we are spending so much time thinking about what we look like and monitoring what we look like to other people and to ourselves. And we are actually engaging in self-objectification and turning ourselves into objects and thinking, how can we, shape this or shape that? And being so aware of our bodies and the space that we are in over Zoom, that in a way that students were never doing in the classroom before. And so right now we're studying how that can influence girls' learning and cognitive capacities and their ability to remember and engage in flow or conversation, and have like really good discussions in class.
So what have you learned on that? I mean, how bad are the impacts of this?
We're still in the data collection part of the study. We are hoping in about a month to analyze all of the data, but based off of preliminary interviews with participants, they are already noting that just turning off their self view, they feel so much more free. And even when we say, okay, turn off your self view, they get really anxious about not being able to monitor themselves anymore, but then find it so freeing. And so we're seeing that going into it, there's a lot of anxiety because we like to objectify ourselves, not because we like to, but because society has told us as women that we must. And so when we are able to let go of that and get back to the regular classroom environment where you're not constantly monitoring yourself, you can engage much more in your learning and conversation.
Wow, that's so interesting. And Lena, have you seen this play out in particular in like the fashion industries and in the consulting work that you do, of this like unrealistic beautification standard, and then also like how self-absorbed that we've become and like staring at ourselves all day?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I know on average, like teenagers alone are spending approximately 7 hours and 30 minutes a day. And myself working in the corporate world, it's like the average workday plus that. And looking at myself through Zoom and through the lens of Instagram and social media, it's just like constantly growing and growing and growing. And obviously there's no regulation on these filters, and they're just like adding them. And there's just so much work to be done on that level. And I think that, again, hiding your face on Zoom is just the first step, obviously, that needs to be done. And like limiting your screen time is one of the second step that we can also take, that I just actually like found out last week. So.
Wow, I know my screen time was getting up to like 8-9 hours a day, like in August. And I had to fully like delete my Instagram cold turkey, because if I had the Instagram, then I was like fiending for like Instagram.com. I mean, it was a true addiction, but even still, like I feel more present because I'm not posting things for others to see on my life and kind of feel like left out of the culture that people aren't seeing. But at the same time, like I'm not consuming as much either. So it's such a double-edged sword.
Totally. And like for someone that works in the space of social media, I have to be mindful of my usage and also for others around me, because obviously I want, people to engage with our advertising and do so with like caution, but I also don't want them to over engage and like obviously find themselves in a deep hole on the internet for hours on end, because obviously with TikTok now, that's a new problem that a lot of consumers are dealing with, because like I have friends, for example, that are just like literally looking at their phone at like 7 p.m. and then 2-3 hours pass. And then that's just like the end of it, and like, where did the evening go? So.
Yeah. 1 minute turns into like 45, like, like that. Olivia, did you have something to add?
Yeah, going off of social media use, there is something called upward social comparison as well that is really dangerous for a lot of young girls and women to engage in. So posting can be a really beneficial thing, and interacting with other people's posts because you're building those social connections. But once these young women and girls start comparing themselves to others and actually putting themselves down, thinking, oh, if I could look like this, oh, if I could look like that, and then looking back at their own photos and saying, oh, I wish this was different. I wish I was different in that way. Then it gets really negative and really toxic for women and girls. And so, as I'll talk about also later, in terms of limiting screen time, we found that if you can limit to 30 to 60 minutes a day, that can really help in terms of keeping up with your social interactions while also not allowing yourself to engage in as much upward social comparison.
I love that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Just to piggyback off of that, something that I've actually noticed is that the social media beauty community is actually very toxic. I'm not talking about like the makeup artists or like the people that, like fashion and all that stuff. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the judgment on that community. This is actually a conversation I had with Diana yesterday. But basically, whenever someone gets plastic surgery, for example, the community is like, oh, why don't you tell us about it? You're setting such a bad example for young girls because you're not being open about it. But then when they are open about it, they're like, oh, why'd you do that to yourself? You're like, it's very, very contradictory because they're so negative when people do open up about it, but then they hate on them for not opening up about it. And it's just such a hard space to be in and to actually feel like yourself, because people are just so judgmental regardless of whether you do what they want or not.
Yeah.
I think another really important point about like these social networks is that like it's so hard to like withdraw yourself, because like as soon as you're on it, like it's almost like these algorithms are like optimizing for you to like your engagement, right? And then retaining, okay, like making predictions based on like all of your past data. So it's like, okay, like how much time do you spend looking at a certain post? Like which post do you like? Which post do you save? And so like if you're engaging with certain posts and then like you're like it affects your mental health and whatnot, like you're just being flooded with more. So I don't know, it's almost gotten so big, like these social networks are like giants now, right? And it's like we can't, okay, I don't want to say we can't, but like in the short term, I don't think it's like reasonable to say, okay, let's just dissolve everything and like enjoy the beauty of the world. Like I don't think that's reasonable. So in the short term, I think it's up to us to kind of figure out how we can alter our mindsets, like I guess consume in moderation. And then in the long term, like figuring out how we can monitor the outcomes of these algorithms, right? Because they can be used for good. I think it was at Queensland University in Australia where they did like they developed an algorithm that can like detect misogyny in Twitter, like whether and it's not just like direct, it studies like context and everything. So like if it's used sarcastically versus like abusively. And so like there's a lot of good that can come out of this, but obviously you need to monitor like every step of the pipeline, and I think that's more of a long-term goal. And like the action items that we want to get out of this are more short-term so that we can actually deal with this. Like I noticed that a lot of like preteen girls are the most affected by this, right? Because I guess it's also like the lack of self-awareness that contributes to this. So and the problem is like these algorithms are targeting like the most vulnerable, right? So it's like the data that you feed in, it's like I guess you can like cater like personalized ads and whatnot to feed to them and kind of influence their mindset. And like I don't know if you guys watched like this Social Dilemma documentary. I loved it. And I think one thing that they mentioned was that like essentially they're paying for the right to change our mind, right? And so like the most malleable minds are like these young like preteen girls. And so I think that's where it becomes really dangerous, and awareness is obviously the first step to address the problem.
Yeah, 100%. And so we actually have a question in the Q&A, and I wanted to get to that at the end, but it's just so relevant to this topic right now. And I think, Samia, you hit it on the head, and we can kind of elaborate more on this. This question just came from Hetty. How can we make positive changes to uses of filters and seeing our self-image? Would female creators of algorithms help?
I think it starts with a design thinking process, obviously on the engineering side, but also on the entrepreneurial side. A lot of these like major corporations, obviously there's a lot of stepping stones that need to be made before you can obviously get in the eyes and offices of those people. So it really starts with obviously starting with youth-led conversations amongst us, for example, and creating potentially mastermind groups within each other that we can, slowly engage with, and obviously share industry relevant articles, also share topics that are relevant to what's happening in the space, how we can obviously dissolve any airbrush filters that are too exaggerated for young consumers, and also for even just having conversations with parents and regulating this for teenagers to just understand that this is not like the norm, and we have to essentially regulate it from an early age. So
I think just to add on to that, another big part of it is creating like a community where it's okay to be open about using like Photoshop or using filters. Because right now we have a community where you can't be open about those kind of things. Like I mentioned, like with plastic surgery, you just can't be open about it or you get hated on. But I think we need to have a community where you can be open so people have the ability to make those choices and use those things if they want to, but also so that young people or just people in general don't feel like this is what I'm supposed to look like if that's not a reality, because filters are not a reality. Zoom beautification is not a reality. It's not actually real. It's just something that you
mean I don't have this pimple right here?
Yeah, it's just something
you can't see it, so it's not there.
But yeah, it's just about the first step, I think, in my opinion, should be like trying to foster a culture where it's okay to be open about these kinds of things.
I think it's tricky though, because like I don't know, like I think it takes time to like normalize this kind of stigma and whatnot. And so like when, as I said, like, you know, like preteen girls, like they don't lack, I mean, they don't have this much like sufficient self-awareness, I would say. So like when they're exposed to these like pictures of or like unrealistic beauty standards, like that's what they equate to the truth, right? It's almost like the consensus theory, where it's like that's what they like, popular opinion equals truth. And so I think like that's a massive problem, and that comes down to like us identifying like our unconscious bias and then like monitoring our thoughts and figuring out how to rewire them. And like obviously like that's such an unrealistic expectation for like young girls, right? So I would honestly say like it comes down to just like setting simple regulations, like literally getting it out of their vocabulary, like delete social media apps or like don't even expose them like these to them until they're, I don't know, like in high school, right?
I think
And
sorry.
yeah, another thing that stood out to me in that question was like, would like female designers or female engineers help? And I think like it would, in the sense that there's a sense of empathy there. However, like women everywhere are struggling with this, right? So like I think like I don't know. I don't think there's a massive difference there, like by having women, like female engineers. I think it's important to, they'd be good in like, I guess, sharing their perspective and like, I guess, like opening minds in that sense. But I don't think that it would alter this kind of like deep rooted, I don't know, insecurity that we see that like propagates among so many young women.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on. I think that yes, having women, again, like you took the words right out of my mouth, it could help with empathy. But when it comes to a lot of the other things, I agree. Like it's hard to change an entire community's mind about one thing. It could take a very long time, and I don't necessarily think that it's an option either to just tell people, okay, just don't get Instagram until you're in high school or whatever it is, right? Because legally you shouldn't download the app unless you're 13 years old. Like that's the advisory that they have, right? So technically preteens shouldn't even be allowed to have the app, because to have an account you have to be older than 13, right? So
we actually just got a question in the chat from Elaine, and the question was, any ideas on how to work with parents and daughters, maybe starting at 8 to 10 years old before access to social media becomes too ingrained? So yeah, maybe let's tackle this question, because I think Haley, perfect segue to this, because I didn't even know that it was 13 was the recommendation.
Yeah, for sure. I think like having a conversation with your kids about social media is important. I feel like a lot of parents just kind of, it's either you let your kid do whatever they want to do, or you like are super strict and everything your kid does goes by you. I haven't met a lot of people that have like a very, very good balance between the two. And I think that's just because parents are like worried for their kids, right? Where there's an era right now where they don't know what's happening. Like everything's just moving so fast. Tech is growing exponentially, literally. And I think it's just so important to have like a conversation with these people, like with your kids especially, about like, hey, like what kind of accounts do you like, what kind of things do you like, and just go through it with them and make sure that they understand that like this isn't real. Like you can go through Photoshop apps with them, literally take a picture of them and go through the Photoshop app with them, Photoshop it in any way you want, and they'll be like, that's not me anymore. They'll be like, yes, exactly, that's what these people do, right? I think it's just important to have a conversation.
Another thing is like this is probably something down the line. Like I'm thinking more like solution, because like you said, like the 13 like age limit is like a lot of people don't know about it, and it's really not enforced, right? So like I don't know, eventually I assume we're gonna hit a time where like it should be enforced. And another thing is like I think I brought this up yesterday, where like misogyny manifests itself in a lot of these algorithms. And like it's like sometimes like because of the data set that's being fed into these algorithms, like women are being disproportionately affected and discriminated. And I read somewhere that like some women are literally switching their status to male so that they aren't being prohibited from like certain things or having their, you know, post shadow banned. Like that's ridiculous. That's crazy to me because it's like it's gotten to that extent where like you know, like I mentioned salty, like it was a certain Instagram account that was, you know, like as positive, like relationships, like focus on that kind of thing. And they like Instagram just took down or like shadow banned a lot of their posts because they said they were selling illegal sex services. And like that's nuts to me, right? Because it's like it depends on what's being fed into these algorithms and what they optimize for. And one thing I loved that was mentioned in that documentary was that like algorithms aren't objective, right? It's literally just opinions manifested in code. Like I think like that just sums it up. Like that's a perfect one-liner for what's going on with like biased algorithms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting amazing questions in the chat. So, and a lot of your questions were actually like super in line with what we were going to ask anyway. So thank you all so much for your engagement. The next question is around evolution. So obviously the panel that we're all on today is a part of the Tech for Good category. And Gandhi, you asked some amazing questions. And your question is, how do we think these problems about addiction and unrealistic standards will evolve in the coming years? And I guess to add to that, on this topic of Tech for Good, how can we use technology to forward along the evolution? Like what can we do and what can companies do? So I would actually love for each of you to answer that. So maybe we'll do Lena, Samia, Olivia, Haley, because I just think this is such an amazing question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So it's on like Tech for Good. So how can we use Tech for Good, and what will the evolution of this look like in the coming years?
I think obviously with tech, it's an ever evolving concept that you just have to get with. And in terms of leading the conversation with the youth, I think it starts obviously with a conversation as we are having today. And from there, we can take these conversations and then manifest this into our corporate structure. Like for me, I participate in like a female organization called Lena, which is our women's affinity group. And for us specifically, I think that just having these conversations, leading it from the ground up with more junior level participants all the way up to executive level participants, we have to look at it from an organizational standpoint, even within the corporate structure. So whether that's through, you know, having these conversations through apps, whether it's through having them online or just like looking at it from a granular level of like human conversations, I think that we're happy to just like lead from that perspective as well. So
yeah, that's an amazing point, especially on the recruiting piece of it and how companies can get involved too. That, you know, a lot of it we have to contribute as well, but a lot of it will be organizational too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I really like this question, and I don't know. My thoughts are a little bit pessimistic in that, like, right? I think like
give us the real. Give us what
I think I'm gonna be totally honest. I think like right now, like tech is like growing so rapidly, and like things are getting automated all the time, and like obviously if you don't keep up, you're gonna fall behind. But I feel like there's so many consequences and downsides that have come out of it. And like, just aside from tech, just like massive problems in the world that are still not being addressed, right? And so I feel like the problems like outweigh the benefits right now. And like, that's where we need to focus, right? There's so many like smart young people that we need that have like really valuable perspectives and, you know, are up to date with this kind of emerging tech, but like, we don't have enough people.
All of you.
Yeah, exactly. Addressing these problems, right? And so I think before we start, we need to address all this like collateral damage before we can even like propel forward at a much faster rate. So even like massive problems like, I don't know, like world hunger, like women's mental health, like these things can be addressed with so many of the tech we have access to now, right? But we're dealing with such like granular problems, like the issues that come out of like, you know, social media addiction and whatnot. And like, this is such like first world problems kind of thing, you know what I mean? And like, I think it, like, if we zoom out a little bit and think about, okay, like how can we really apply this to solve some of the massive problems that exist in the world? Like, it's so eye-opening. And I think like that's why I got so interested in mental health, because like in like developing countries, for example, like that's not even on their radar, right? Like some people are so concerned about like, am I even going to get my next meal? So like, I think we just like, of course, like these problems are important to address, but there's so many, okay, like I think we need to address this collateral damage that comes out of, social media addiction and whatnot. And B, just zoom out and think about other massive problems that like this can be leveraged to solve, right? Because we have so many smart people, like so many young people that are really ambitious, like working on really cool things. And we literally just need collective will, like to actually get this going. And so, yeah, that was another point that they made in the documentary that I loved. That was like, if we want to, I guess, escape this dystopia, like the miracle is going to be collective will, right? And so that's why I think like summits like this are so useful to kind of expose people to the problems like at a high level, and so that when they're inspired, they can just dive in whenever they need to. And we have more smart people like working on massive problems.
Yeah, absolutely. That was so beautifully said. It's beautifully said. Olivia, what about you? What are your thoughts on the evolution of all this and how we can use tech for good?
Yeah, so I think like right now we are at such a critical point in how we use digital media and digital devices. We can either go to the good and we can start using it better, or if we don't do anything at all, we will just continue to get worse. And so the fact that we are all here right now is a really good sign, because us as youth, we can do a lot, but we can't do it alone. Especially the upcoming generations, these young girls and boys, they need parents, teachers, and friends. They need everyone to rally around them. We are a community and we need to solve this problem together as a community. And so I think like parents can really help in having those conversations, like Lena was saying, and saying, okay, this is how we use social media, and even saying, okay, let's do this together as a family or with your friends. Let's do this together instead of going to social media, and coming up with things to do, like playing games, getting outside, coming up with ideas. That is a big parental responsibility, is to help your child get away from screens, as well as to be a role model for themselves or for your child themselves. And so to not go to Facebook right away or go to your phone right away, or to put it away when you have a conversation with them, because children will model your behavior. And so you need to also know how you are using technology in order to help them. And parent or teachers also need to look at how technology is being used in their classrooms and saying, okay, how can I help these children learn the best way they can? And for most of them, that's putting all technology away, even if it's for classroom purposes. They've actually found that technology doesn't help that much. Like, yes, we can look up answers, but that's probably one of the only ways that it can actually help. And then also for kids to say, okay, I need to monitor how much time I am spending. I need to monitor how I'm spending my time on it. Am I engaging with people? Am I making connections? Or am I just scrolling passively? Because there's a big difference in how that plays on your mental health and well-being. And so everyone has to come together to solve this from their own perspective. And for some of us, like, we have patterns ingrained in us, but our brains are plastic. We can change our circuitry and how we think about it. It is not too late to change any of our behaviors, but we also have to start changing these behaviors in young children and establish them before they form these patterns as well.
Amazing. I think just jumping off of that, like something really important to consider is like nowadays, like with like classes at home, like it's so easy to get distracted, and like 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 you'll be sitting in class with like your phone and another laptop and whatever. There's like 20 things going on around you, and so like I guess like the efficiency of learning is obviously like so poor nowadays too, and like especially with like high school seniors, like college seniors, it's like, what are we gonna do when we like step into the workforce? Like, are we actually equipped to like do things properly? Because it's like everything is almost like half-assed, right? So I don't know. I think like as you said, like being intentional about certain things and really going in with like, okay, like I'm not even gonna have my phone in the room, or like turning off all my notifications like while I'm in class, like whatnot, like I think are so important, because if you just go in and you know, all of this is like at your disposal, I think it's really hard to monitor, like you said, like certain passive behaviors, right? Like I couldn't tell you how many times I've just like opened Instagram and scrolled and I'm not consuming anything. Like I'm just scrolling and it's like why, right? So yeah, I think that was a really, really valuable point.
Yeah, the digital pacifier, as they call it. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and like just to add on to that, like I think that another thing that you could do is just like set your goals, like set your intention for what you want to get out of it. So if you're in grade 9 math, for example, you're like, okay, at the end of the year, I want a 98. And then for each assignment, you like calculate exactly what grade you want to get, and then you put that much effort into that grade. So being instead of being effort oriented, being outcome oriented could help a lot with that kind of thing, because then you're putting in as much effort as you know you need to get the result that you want. So it's like a win-win in both ways. Just to add on to like the original topic of like the evolution of tech for good, I think that right now when we use social media, the algorithm is, like Samia said, again, it's very much like an opinion-based algorithm. It's like, okay, so you like this, cool, we're going to show you more of this that you stay here longer. But the problem with that is it becomes an echo chamber. So people actually don't get exposed to new ideas, which is kind of controversial, especially since the idea of the internet and all of these things is so that you can get exposed to new things. Like I know for me, I bought shoes recently, and now all I see on my Instagram is those shoes and like different colors, and like that's all I see, and I'm tired of it now. But some people might just like keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling, because it's an echo chamber. It's feeding back your ideas to you. This can be really dangerous going forward, because if people have like very strong opinions about something, if they live in this echo chamber their entire life, that's all they're getting back to them. They're getting their own ideas just fed straight back to them. And that can be very, very dangerous, because there's no longer the ability to be open-minded. It's just, this is all I've heard my entire life. Obviously, this is what the whole internet thinks. Therefore, I am probably right. So I'm going to go into this world with this assumption that I'm correct about this.
Yeah, and I think those are all amazing, amazing points. I just want to be cognizant of time because we've got 2 minutes left here. And so I think what the best thing to do would be, we have about 6 questions left in this chat, which means that obviously, ladies, we're crushing it. Everyone is engaging with our content, and thank you everyone for being engaged. Let's put these questions in the chat room for this session. And I just have one final closing question, and it addresses a lot of the questions too in the chat. So one of the things we really wanted to get out of this panel is action-oriented solutions. Haley, you just mentioned it, outcome-oriented. What are the goals? So in putting together a list of all the things that we can do, I heard today like multiple different things. So limiting screen times 30 to 60 minutes a day. Analyze whether you're scrolling passively versus making connections. Olivia, what you said about doing it as a family unit. And Haley, what you said about setting intentions and goals. As we're making this list, what are more things that, on this list that we can do of just actionable items that we can take away from this and follow up, to have a better like relationship with social media, relationship with the beauty standards, etc. And whether it's even, Olivia, I know you've got a lot of books, podcasts, anything you recommend, like give us some homework, ladies, on things to do.
Yeah. So I think I love that you said that. And I think like it's really difficult to kind of just go on a detox and be like, I'm going to get rid of everything, just enjoy the world. And so I think there are ways you can consume in moderation. And so another thing is like, I'll tell you from personal experience, like I'm a very like competitive person. Like I'll take like any chance to debate. And the problem with that is like I listen to speak rather than like listen to learn, and like I'm working on this. And so like rather than being more argumentative, like I'd rather gain like more perspectives, right? Like just like closer to an objective truth. And I think like that comes from what Haley said, like of like escaping this echo chamber and like almost seeking out like the opposite of like perspective, like whether that be on like social media, like Twitter especially. Oh my God. Like
Really good one. So seek out the opposite perspective. Okay, I know we lightning round. Let's do Lena, Olivia, Haley. Give us 2 quick things that we can do, and then we have to wrap up.
For parents, I think it starts with talking about body positivity. Right now, I know for a fact there's worksheets online that you can find online that you can have with your children, you know, at home on Sunday evenings, once a week, once a month. And then from there, even with you guys that are participating in this current session, I would love to create like a mastermind group and kind of just keep this conversation going, where we can share all of our articles that cross our path, whether there's forums that are obviously going to be beneficial that we can like continue to pass this information forward, and maybe even products that, you know, are standalone, great for the future of tech. So I think that it starts with that. So yeah.
Amazing. I love both of those. Olivia?
Yeah, I think one other thing, particularly for people that use Instagram, I think being more genuine and authentic on there. I know a lot of people have what they call finstas or fake instas, and a lot of people talk about that and using it almost as a diary and having that as their true, raw, authentic self, where they don't show all of the pretty pictures and all of the pretty good things that have happened to them. And so I think getting rid of finstas and making them your rinsta and having that translate to your real life is one thing that you can also do. And that applies to all platforms as well. And even conversations in real life, talking about how you're struggling with social media and what your child is struggling with even, and what content are they consuming and putting out there, as well as just reading articles. If you just go on Google Scholar and look up social media, you can find so many articles and resources on how to talk about things and deal with things, and even to recognize what problems you may be having.
Amazing. Finstas to Rinstas. New slogan of 2020. I love it. And Haley, let's close it out here, and then I'll close with just one last announcement.
Alrighty, so firstly, my first thing is I think that we should normalize conversations about social media and about the effects of social media. This isn't very much like a normal conversation that you would just have with your friend. Like a lot of people would think that that's weird. And I think it's important for us to be open about these kinds of conversations, because I know kids would be like, oh, mom, why are you talking to me about that? Like, no, nobody else's parents do that. But if it's like a norm, then people want to have the conversation.
Yeah.
The second thing also is Android people, I'm sorry if you're here, but I know Apple has a screen time setting where you can set like X amount of time on a certain app. That could be really useful, especially if you're starting on social media. And I know like TikTok can get addictive. So if you're just scrolling, it'll come up and it'll tell you you have reached your time limit, or you have spent X amount of time on this app. And then you'll be like, oh my God, really? And then you'll just get off of it. So it's just something small that you can do to make sure that you're not just wasting your entire day on a social platform looking at things that you already know.
I love all of that. I mean, you guys have offered some incredible suggestions today: screen time settings, mastermind groups, Rinsta, body positivity worksheets, 30 to 60 minutes of screen time a day. I think the best thing to do is let's put a list of these in the chat of like our key takeaways and best practices for the session, so that all of our listeners and people who watch the replay can have access. But women, I just want to thank you so much. Like I wish you guys could hear this like round of applause. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for all of your insights, and thank you for everything that you're doing outside of this panel in daily life. Like, you guys are the next generation leaders, and like I want to work for you someday. So thank you again so much for being here. And just one final housekeeping announcement. After this session, make sure to check out the other sessions. The keynote is coming up next with the director and main star of The Social Dilemma, which I'm so excited for. And make sure to check out in the Whova app. There's all partner pages. There's different chats. There's discussion boards. There's a village where you can see different sponsors. And there's actually a way to connect with other people. So bringing it back to what Olivia said of actively engaging and connecting with people, you can make connections straight from the Whova app. So huge plug to head back into the conference. And Thank you all so much for your time today. And let's also keep the dialogue going. So if we want to actually put our emails in as well, feel free to reach out to any of us directly after this session. So with that, thank you so much, ladies. Thank you.